Hello, my name is Sarah Summar. I'm on the faculty at the Center for Musical Arts in Lafayette, Colorado. In this video, I will provide a listener's guide to the Colorado Music Festival's program for 2025 titled Anna Kiko Myers Plays Ravel. This program is set for the evenings of July 17th and 18th in Chautauqua Auditorium. For 3 decades now, Anna Kiko Myers has performed around the world as a recitalist, as a soloist with leading orchestras, and she has recorded more than 40 releases, which have become staples of classical music, radio, and streaming platforms. Myers is particularly recognized as a muse and champion of many of the world's most notable living composers, including Philip Glass, Arvo Pärt, Jennifer Higdon, and Michael Daugherty, and many, many more. And if you are in Colorado on July 17th and 18th, you could be among the first concertgoers to hear her premiere, The Pacific Has No Name, showpiece for violin by Grammy-winning American composer and conductor Eric Whitacre. On that same Colorado Music Festival program, Anna Kiko Myers will perform the beautifully dazzling Tzigane by Maurice Ravel. At the start of the evening, music director Peter Ungen will lead the festival orchestra in performing Aaron Copland's idyllic tribute to the American heartland, Appalachian Spring. There is an old saying that talking about music is like dancing about architecture. It's not an easy task. But if anyone ever gave us the tools to put into words what it is like to hear and experience a great piece of orchestral music, it is American composer Aaron Copland, who changed the American musical landscape, not just with his compositions, but also with his teachings, as found in his 1957 text, What to Listen For in Music. Aaron Copland was arguably the first composer to successfully develop a style that was both uniquely American and widely appreciated by audiences in America and abroad. His ballet, Appalachian Spring, created for choreographer Martha Graham in 1944, was the crown jewel of this achievement. Copland's orchestral adaptation of his music for the ballet subsequently won him the Pulitzer Prize for Music in 1945, and it remains one of his most performed and most beloved orchestral works. It is this Appalachian Spring Suite for Orchestra that I will walk you through now. While the original ballet score was for a 13-piece ensemble of strings, woodwinds, and piano, the suite arranges the music into 8 sections for a full orchestra. As I walk you through this beautifully cohesive 8-part structure, I will try to demonstrate the many, many ways that Aaron's iconically American musical voice shines through in the way he approaches the melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic content of this work. Now, what I recall from my own first hearing of Appalachian Spring is that the one thing I knew ahead of time is that it featured the delightful shaker melody, Simple Gifts. What I didn't know is that this memorable tune wouldn't occur in full until we were nearly 18 minutes into the work. So I ended up waiting for that tune, almost to the point of missing the many beautiful and exhilarating musical moments that preceded. So I've chosen 10 such musical moments to play for you at the piano to give you something to listen for when you hear the orchestral version. I also will read for you Copland's comments about each section. The first, to be played very slowly. It's an introduction with characters introduced one by one in a suffused light. This piece, so here it begins with a simple A major arpeggio that accumulates in the strings and clarinet. The second iteration adding the major seventh to the chord, creating a sense of anticipation. like the dawning of a new and special day. Strings and woodwinds then continue on weaving a tapestry of sound that is gentle and warm as a morning sunrise, until we reach part two, an allegro, indicating, Copland indicates to be a sudden burst of unison strings in A major, starting the action with an elated religious sentiment. Compare what is the last arpeggio of the example I'm about to play with what we just ended with. And it's kind of flipped over. We're going to come down the arpeggio. Descending arpeggio at the end of this excerpt is presented not just as a surface embellishment, as arpeggios often are in classical music, but as a jaunty unidirectional melody that challenges long-established European norms for balance in melodic structure, that a melody should have ups and downs in it instead of all one direction. And that's something we'll hear throughout the work. The moderato that follows is a duet for the bride and her intended, depicting tenderness and passion. These examples will show us that Aaron Copland has an impressive facility with the modernist techniques in which he immersed himself in the 20s and early 1930s. In his own style, but not unlike Igor Stravinsky, Copland had the ability to make rhythms that mixed longer and shorter beats, so ba, 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 in a way that was incredibly danceable. As in this example, which I'll count out and play for you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1 and 2, and 1, 2, 3, so that it sounds like this. You may have recognized material at the end of that excerpt as a reference to our sunrise music from the beginning of the work. This is the first but not the last time that material will appear, functioning as the mortar that holds the suite together. Now, let's talk again about those modernist influences with some beautifully composed dissonant counterpoint that in the ballet accompanied an impassioned duet between the bride and groom. Try to imagine the lush string sound supporting the tension, strength, and long lines in this pas de deux. after this interlude of beautiful linear counterpoint, we will hear a very dance-like portion of the work. He says it's to be played quite fast. It's the revivalist and his flock with folksy feelings and suggestions of square dances and country fiddlers. As Copland's notes suggest, here you'll hear characteristics that recall his popular ballets Rodeo and Billy the Kid. It starts with the perpetual motion of a repeated pedal tone in staccato eighth notes that provide a rhythmic backdrop for the syncopated rhythms to come. A lover of jazz music, I think Copland understood that any truly American music composed in the 1940s would surely incorporate jazz elements, like the syncopated rhythms and extended harmonies that you hear in this work. Being a composer myself, I can tell you that the toughest part about composing such rhythmically driving music isn't getting the fast tempo started, but in slowing it down, releasing the tension and that charge of energy and shifting the mood to something more contemplative. One way Copland does that throughout his works is with the use of short silences between accented utterances like this. With these patterns of thick chords and grand pauses, the composer is able to transition quickly, yet quite seamlessly back to our sunrise motif marked meno mosso. We move later into another slow section, a transitioning scene, reminiscent of the introduction. Basically the same harmonies as that opening arpeggio, but transposed down a half step. One thing, in addition, that complements the unidirectional presentation of this melodic material is that Copland is considered to have found a way to portray the openness of the American landscape by his voicing of chords. And he does it in a way that emphasizes what we consider the more open intervals of fourths and fifths, and rather than the third. He also puts a lot of space between each voice of the chord. Now, the next part, you're most likely to be familiar with it. Scenes of daily activity for the bride and her farmer husband, featuring 5 variations on a shaker theme. So Simple Gifts is a shaker dancing song that was composed in 1848 by Joseph Brackett Jr., a member of the shaker community, who himself claimed to have created this song as an imitation of what folk music sounded like. So listeners can't be blamed for sometimes misappropriating it and assuming that it was folk music, maybe handed from Ireland or England, but it is a composed work. And it was meant to be danced to as part of a Shaker religious service. This is one of the most often recorded tunes. I'd like to read you the lyrics because I do believe by using the entire tune, both the verse and the chorus, Copland is showing to us that the meaning of the tune is important. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right. Copland's setting of simple gifts goes through 5 iterations, in which he varies the instrumentation, the tempo, and dynamics of the music. All of them can be described as using traditional variation technique in a pretty straightforward way. Something I like to credit to this is that meaning of the simple gifts texts. This sort of brings us to the beginning of the closing of the work. The 5 variations are followed by a moderato, recognized just as easily as the start of the simple gifts variation is Copland's departure from it. The chorale-like passage transitions us once again to our sunrise music, but it is different this time, perhaps transformed into a sunset instead of ending on that tension-building major 7th. I'll play that, the part marked like a prayer, and then I'll turn the page and play the ending of the work for you. As I leave the piano to retrieve my violin, I'd like to say a few words about Maurice Ravel. He predated Aaron Copland by about 25 years, his career did, and his contemporaries, Erik Satie and Claude Debussy, he was a key player in the development of the new French sound during Paris's interwar period, the 20s and 30s. Ravel was known particularly for exploring new approaches to musical form, as in his famous work Bolero, which pushes the envelope of using repetition to hold a work together. This piece, titled Tzigane, Rhapsodie de Concert, is a marvelous example of Ravel's colorful and fluid compositional style. It was originally composed for violin and piano in 1924, then immediately recomposed for orchestra half a year later. The title translates as gypsy and is meant to evoke the Romani culture and people, particularly of Hungary and Romania. Today we understand both those terms to be offensive to the Romani people. The piece, nonetheless, does reflect a love and admiration for the musical contributions of the Romani people in late 19th century Europe. The work opens with a long, slow, and deeply expressive introduction, reminiscent of a Hungarian czardas, which is a tavern dance. It starts in this declarative manner and then transitions to a whirlwind of exuberant instrumental showmanship. The first line of this nearly 5-minute display of impassioned and virtuosic violin playing begins with the short, long, rhythmic motive. Now, I have never forgotten the first time I heard this incredible cadenza. It is a big part of what makes this piece a truly stunning jewel in the violin repertoire. But after this long, impassioned introduction, there's a dreamlike transitional duet with the harp that we hear. After that, we will hear the first theme presented clearly and plainly by the soloist. This theme is very important as Ravel alters it throughout the work. The orchestra replies with the second theme in the clarinet, and later on the violin will play both that first and second theme. Ravel proceeds from here to fully explore the full color palette available both to the solo violinist and to the orchestra via a set of variations, once again, on the first theme. But unlike Copland's variations on simple gifts, the 6 variations of Ravel's first theme are anything but simple. In particular, he seems to have made an extreme effort to stretch the limits of the violin's technical and timbral capabilities. I'll now walk through the ways Ravel varies the first theme with changes to rhythm, tempo, tessitura, and tone color. What this allows the soloist to do, and I've noticed this in Anna Kiko-Meyer's interpretation, is to sort of add a little folky kind of style to that variation. You can make the E that's fingered on the A string just slightly out of tune, or let it wobble up to the pitch to match the open E. The second variation uses a technique called, pizzicato. That's simply plucking the strings with this hand usually. But there's also a very showy and challenging technique of plucking with the left hand. So the performer is asked to alternate these two. I'm going to do it slowly. It's quite impressive. I think, in my opinion, it's perhaps a reference to the hammered dulcimer instrument that we hear in a Romani orchestra. After that second rendition, we get a short orchestral interlude that will come back later and be played by the violin too. That's really the third theme of the piece, and the third and fourth themes are just needed to break up the repetition we get from all these variations of the same first theme. Another technique that's used a lot in this piece is harmonics. This technique takes advantage of the physical properties of a string and its tendency to vibrate not just as a whole, but as a half, two halves, as the third and fourth. So it creates this very clear flute-like sound. And it's accomplished by the violinist placing their finger in exactly the right spot and just touching lightly. The next variation, the fourth, is perhaps my favorite. I call it the fiddle train variation because it's lots of double stops and it's very driving. So the tune here next is going to be buried in this laborious fiddle-like passage of double stops. Double stops means two strings at the same time. Okay, so like that. And among all of that racket, you'll hear that will come through. The next technique that's demonstrated in the fifth variation is very familiar and traditional, the trill. Here's a simple trill going back to the Baroque period as a way to ornament long notes and emphasize them. Ravel uses it differently here by putting the melody in the high register and trilling on every single note through the entire note. So it takes a lot of practice to do that well and have the melody come out, but it does create this sort of dreamy effect. Now the fourth theme. I think the fourth variation is my favorite of the first theme, and the fourth theme might be my favorite of them all. Sounds very Eastern European, and it marks the beginning of the ending of this Rhapsody for Violin and Orchestra. And the piece goes out with a bang. I feel like this part of it is reminiscent of a dance battle. And remember, it is evocative of the Czardas, which was a tavern dance that gave the musicians a chance to show off their skill. So you can imagine a dance battle or dueling violins. Even though there's only one soloist, the piece is written in such a way that she is inspiring and interrupting herself from here all the way to the end until the piece gets so fast that it can't get any faster. The tempo changes so often. I'm going to read to you all the tempo markings in the last 150 bars. So, from that meno vivo grandioso, we have a moderato, esitando, meaning hesitatingly, accelerando, vivo, rallentando, allegro, accelerando, vivo, moderato, accelerando, vivo, meno vivo, accelerando, vivo, meno vivo, accelerando poco a poco, sempre accelerando poco meno vivo, accelerando presto, at the end. And it ends with 3 pizzicato chords in the violin, as if to say that the dancers are exhausted and plunk back down in their tavern seats to conclude the work. So I hope that you can hear some of these exciting, colorful elements in the Tzigane by Ravel.